In this video, I'd like to debunk a widely proliferated myth about the subject of NLP. And that is the myth that NLP is just some kind of new age style positive thinking. It's all about just thinking positively all the time. Now, of course, it is good to think positively most of the time, but that's not the entirety of what NLP has to offer. It doesn't really illustrate it in the most accurate light. Because generally speaking, as a human being, and this is a broad generalization, whenever we approach any situation, we can have three broad approaches that we can take. The first is, of course, the positive approach, and that's where we take the situation, we take the experience, and we pretty much ignore all the negative stuff and then focus only on the positive. That's be an example of the positive psychology approach. A good example of this is something called a positive affirmation. I don't know if you've heard of these things before, but it's basically where you come up with some kind of line, something positive that you would like to believe about yourself. And then you basically stand in the mirror and you repeat it over and over again, 50 times a day for roughly 30 days. Why 30 days? Well, apparently that's the time it takes to rewire it or wire it inside the brain. So for example, I could stand in the mirror and say, I am good enough. I am amazing. I look like George Clooney. I am so handsome. People love me. And obviously that's a very easy thing to believe. Now, positive affirmations are okay to a certain extent, but we are not too big on them in NLP, because by standing in front of the mirror and saying something until you believe it is not really working from the strongest base. Because it works from the assumption that you don't already have that ability inside already, and we don't believe that as an NLPer. We believe that as human beings we have all the resources, psychological resources, to deal with the challenges on a day-to-day basis. And it's more about bringing them from the background into the foreground of our experience so that we can more readily connect with them. So by standing in front of the mirror trying to force a suggestion in like that, in our opinion, isn't really useful. It doesn't work from the best place, and most of the time it doesn't really work because your brain goes, no, that's not right, that's just rubbish, and you're trying to do it from a very conscious place. What we do in NLP is more about engage the imagination so that you can start to bypass this conscious place and then reprogram at a much more profound and useful level. So that would be the positive approach, and obviously a lot of the time we are looking to be positive. But just to focus only on the positive is not necessarily useful. Sometimes it's useful to look at what's wrong and then address that. That could be the best thing to help you move forward. So then we have the second broad category of thinking or approach that we have to any situation, and that is negative thinking. And this is where you take all the positive, you ignore it, and then you just focus on all the bad. You bitch and whine and moan and doesn't life suck? And we all know these emotional mood hoovers or emotional vampires that perhaps you've worked with in the past. Now, obviously it goes without saying that NLP is not about negative thinking. Just as an aside, when you meet someone who's particularly negative, they never say they're negative, do they? They always call themselves realists. This is a real world, just be realistic. If that's the real world, then we're all screwed. But anyway. So NLP is of course not about negative thinking. And in my opinion, NLP is about a third category, and that's useful thinking. It's about doing what's most useful in any situation. And sometimes that is about looking at the bad stuff. Maybe it's about temporarily connecting with a problem so that you can feel it and then start to explore a potential positive solution. So it's not just about being positive and happy all the time. It's definitely not about being negative, but it's about doing what's most useful in any particular situation. It's outcome driven. It's all about getting more useful and profound and productive results. So these are the three sort of main categories of thinking. Obviously the human mind goes way beyond that. Just a very crude way of looking at how we tend to approach various different situations. But the main thing behind this video is hopefully to debunk this idea that NLP is all about positivity. We do things from a positive base, of course we do, but ultimately it's about doing things in a way that's practical. It's about doing what's most useful in any particular situation. So hopefully this enlightens you in terms of what NLP is and how it tends to be used. So in the next video, Brian is going to be panning the camera back a little bit and looking at an overall model. We've created this nice little acronym to understand the main pillars of NLP. So once you're ready, head over to the next video, spend some time with Brian, and I'll see you later on.